Morning at NTV. We're live from Kampala's Friendly Conference Center. I'm Andrew Chamagiromuntu. So now, money is rearing its ugly head in our politics, if I should put it that way. Government is introducing cost cutting, and Norbert Mao this week crowd foul that he is running out of funds. Now, to speak to us about this and more, we have Mr. Julius Mukunda, the Executive Director of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, on Zoom, and Mr. Felix Kafuma from the Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning, viewers.
And Mr. Mukunda, good morning. Can you hear us? Are you live?
I can lie loud and clear.
Absolutely. Now, to start off this conversation, I want to start with you. Mr. Julius Mukunda, where did the supplementary budgets go?
Go or where they came from. Go is they are spending
We can
the
start
money.
whichever direction.
Supplementaries came and money is spent. So I don't know what I should be telling you, but I think it is that supplementaries budget must come from somewhere. You must cut money somewhere to feed the supplementary budgets. And I think these are the kind of, we are seeing some squeeze in some of the government sectors. Like no more lunches, for example, and I believe even there are more other things. So that's where supplementary budgets are coming from. And of course, we know where the supplementary budget is going because it is appropriated by Parliament. Are they related in any way? Are they related in any way to the campaign financing in one or the other? Could you allude to that? I think let us accept the reality that this is a campaign period, and I think once we say campaign period, then we know how funds are likely to be utilized. Okay. So, for example, you'll find that you need to have more resources for electoral commission to run the campaigns. So, if this amount of money had not been budgeted before, then that means you have to pick that money and put it there. Secondly, is if the current government had made some pledges, and by the end of the term, they find that these pledges have not yet been fulfilled. Then definitely you have to go back to the drawing board, because if you get to the campaign trail, definitely the communities and the citizens will be asking you, you promised us this road, you promised us this church, you promised us this and that, we have not seen it. So it becomes a bit incumbent on the current, on the politicians now to be able to get resources and fulfill these particular projects. So yes, it's right to a great extent that some of the funding we have definitely must go to finance some of the campaign pledges that politicians made.
Okay, that is Julius Mukunda. Just hang in there, sir. We're going to get back to you now. Felix Kafuma, what do you see on ground? Are you seeing the money in elections currently, in the current season where we are? Do you see the money?
Yes, you see the money, but I think it's about to get more costly, because when you look at these elections, is that whereas they said it's scientific, but it's also going to allow candidates to move out, which they are doing, and talk to the crowds. Now, in doing that, there are a couple of expenditures you are expected to see. First of all, there is a cost they will not reveal to you, which we call the voter inducement cost. And or expense. The voter inducement expense, that's where you put in things, all sorts of donations. That's when you give back to the community. That's when you appear to be nice and give cash donations, support women groups, support youth groups, but you're spending. But also, I know for a fact that some people are going to resort to what we call door-to-door campaigns.
Yesterday, we had an interim spokesperson and said in the work of COVID-19, they don't want to have rallies. So what they do, the president, when he gets in any area, he meets the leaders. And these leaders, it's their job to take down this information on door-to-door approach. What worries you about the door-to-door approach here?
The door-to-door approach basically opens up, for me, it's a can of worms, because like it or not, at that point when you are interfacing with me, you will not just come and talk to me about the manifesto, about why I'm the best candidate. You will leave behind a pack, probably some groceries, some money. So it's costly. Basically, again, you are inducing me that on the E-Day, make this choice. So, and I think that will even be more costly. But the challenge is that it will be difficult to track that kind of expenditure. We saw it happen in the primaries. Some candidates took that
Oh,
path.
yes, the NRM primaries.
Yes, yeah, we saw it happen in the primaries. So, and I'm not surprised that some are, again, it's being the preferred choice of campaigning. Of course, it creates kind of an interpersonal relationship with between
With the voter.
with the voter. But either way, with the nature of our voters, the politics we have in the land, it's so transactional that issues don't matter. It's what are you living with me? Actually, they're calling it sanitizer. You must sanitize me before I can make the choice you want me to make.
Sanitize my votability.
Yes, yes. So that approach is really going to shoot the expenses when it comes to election campaign spending.
Felix, first of all, paint for us a picture. What exactly does a candidate need to do, need to run in this election?
For starters, even before you go in the main ring, which we call the campaigns which have been officially flagged off by the EC.
Yes.
You have what we call the pre-campaign expenses. These are expenditures where, first of all, you first test the waters. You have to get nominated. The process of getting nominated, you must secure those signatures. Consultations, all those are costs. And then you pay nomination fees. And then afterwards, then you have to put together a team. You have what we call the administration expenses. You have to put together a team, probably have an office, and then that's also a huge expense. And I think I saw one of the candidates complaining on how the fleet of cars is becoming difficult to maintain.
Oh, yes. Mao.
Yes, Mao. So the coordination that goes into having a campaign team to coordinate your movements, to book you, it's quite huge. Then after that, you have what we call the publicity expenses. This is where now you go to the media in all forms, including social media, because now social media is another way of campaigning.
Oh, yes.
And also the fact that we have scientific elections, which I don't think there is scientific per se. It's just a term.
Some are being very conscious, though.
Yes, some are being. But even then, when you look at the way, I think it's an hybrid. It's an hybrid approach. So you and media houses, this is the season for them. So everybody is charging highly. You get people who are going to compose for you songs.
Oh,
that's
yes.
another expenditure. Posters, banners. So it's you incur in that area. Then beyond that, you also incur in the area of the E-Day, election day expenses. You must. I think we have over 34,000 polling stations this time.
Returning officers.
So you must have agents. Beyond agents, you must have, because of the so-called, people are not very, you must have, beyond agents, you must have people to guard your votes. That's another cost.
At every polling station.
At every point. Otherwise, you know what happens in Uganda.
And you better give them enough money that they're not compromised.
Exactly. So you must facilitate them. So all those are expenditures. So anybody who thinks of contesting, you must factor in. There are about 7 expenditure points for any candidate that you must, and they have all elaborate. So I think some people underestimate this exercise. For instance, if an MP, you need a minimum of 500 million.
A minimum?
Yes, and you are just in a constituency. What about a presidential candidate who is supposed to traverse 146 districts? I think that's quite high. You must be having a war chest. I don't see the president spending. First of all, by the fact that he's going to enjoy the privileges of being the incumbent that come with the office. You don't expect the president to spend, the incumbent to spend less than 1 trillion shillings.
Less than?
Yes.
Indulge me, Felix. Those are big figures we're talking about. Julius, did you hear the figures? Those are very big figures.
Yes, because why? As a president, he also has to, unlike others, he must make donations.
And the promises
he must fulfill. He must fulfill promises.
He has earlier promises.
He has a bigger convoy.
Yes.
He must almost reach out to every
corner of the nation.
Every corner of the nation. He must facilitate NRM has a decentralized structure. It's quite decentralized and huge. It must facilitate all those people. Mobilizers. It's quite a huge expense. I don't see him spend less than that.
Wow.
Now, if you are competing against such a candidate, you at least, let's assume you have some sympathy votes. Hypothetically, you must have a minimum of, you must have close to 900 billion.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. Now, the challenge with most candidates is that they remember to fundraise when it's time to
go for the elections. Yes.
I don't think this is something you just wake up and say, I'm going to contest. I think it's a premeditated decision you make.
So you're alluding to the fact that people should mobilize before the time
You
comes?
must mobilize before. You must size up. You must make your groundwork. By the time you are joining the race, you must have some substantial amounts of money on you, so that you don't reach in the middle of the race and you start saying, I can't continue, I can't proceed with this. Because that's clear sign of poor planning on your side.
Okay. Mr. Mukunda now coming in here, he is alluding to quite a lot. The figures is mentioning are worrying on my side. But with all these that you see, the figures is mentioning, it shows that our campaigns are politically, tainted with money. It's entirely monetized. Where does this leave our nation, and what do we see 10, 20 years from now? From you, Julius.
Yes, I think first the figures could be correct. Maybe it could even be a bit more conservative. But I think campaign financing or campaign expenditure in Uganda is extremely very, very high. But you're asking a very good question. Where does it leave us? For me, there are two things. A financial year where there are elections, I count it as a loss. Why? Because you don't actually spend what you have budgeted for. Just imagine within the half of the financial year, we have more than 4 trillion supplementary expenditure. I can tell you more is coming. This is not the end. The second bit of it is the effect of all these expenditures, that you are likely to have a hyperinflation because there is too much money in circulation chasing very little goods and services. I mean, how many television stations do we have vis-a-vis how much demand we need that is currently there? So inflation comes up, and now in the second financial year, Bank of Uganda will need more money to mop up the money so that they can control inflation. So you find that you have these two financial years. One is you are just spending extravagantly. The other one, you are now trying to save the economy. So now, for me, this business of we are cutting expenditures is a blessing in disguise, because it means that it will require Bank of Uganda to use less money, little effort in bumping up the expenditure, because now is that government is also not spending a lot of money. So that also helps in terms of controlling the inflation. Remember, it is just not about that these elections that the election is all we need. No, there is life after elections. So life after election means that we must have an economy that can run, economy that can produce jobs. People can get some income. But if after election we have no economy, then definitely that's the jeopardy. But I agree is that these elections, if your pockets are not big, I can assure you, you are definitely going to see your results. That you are going to see results that are not in your favor. I thank you so much,
Julius. Before you go, so what remedies can government do now that it doesn't run short of funds? Because the other day we saw the headline in one of the dailies here that say that government has run short of funds, and it comes in the wake of COVID-19. It comes on the heels of the election period. So what remedies do we have as a nation?
Oh, I mean, actually, I'm not scared that the government is running short of funds. I don't think government can run short of funds.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me is they are rationalizing. They are saying, maybe we no longer need to start buying lunch for each and everybody. In any case, how many Ugandans afford 2 meals a day? And now for us, we are paying it for people who already have salaries anyway. So government needs to rationalize, fund the expenditure. Stop we talked about this some time back. Stop this welfare and entertainment expenditures. Stop this business of workshops and conferences. Reduce on your inland travel, I can tell you. Stop, cut money for donations and everything, remove it. Do you know what annoys me sometimes is, if you look at the last supplementary expenditure, somebody wanted to buy vehicles, and there was a query, you want to buy vehicles in a supplementary expenditure. Because supplementary expenditure is supposed to be something that was unabsorbable, unavoidable, that you did not even predict that it can happen. But vehicles, so for me, this is the right time. Let them rationalize even further. Stop recruitment for non-essential workers, for example. There we will survive. I am absolutely confident that if government continues to rationalize on its expenditure, we will go through this. After that, we'll return back and the economy will be very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julius. Hang in there. We'll have this conversation still with you. What he has alluded to brings me now to the bigger question, Felix. What is the biggest trigger of this appetite in this season? Are we so desperate as Ugandans? Is poverty to the bone, to the extent that people know the only way to get the votes from us, it's not by giving us ideas, but it's by sanitizing us with money as a nation?
I think, I'm not one of those people who believe, who apportion this behavior by large on poverty, because there have also been elections. For example, with the elections in KCCA, even when you look at the college elections in Uganda, it's the people who are bribed and not necessarily poor. So for me, I don't think it's entirely poverty, but there is a general breakdown of trust between the electorate and the leaders, to the sense that they are treating an election period, it's more like it's payback time. So they know very well that we are sending you to an office to earn big. The electorate know how much MPs are earning, how much an LC5 is earning. They know that politics is lucrative. Because they know that, and they know that these people, by and large, given precedence and their behavior, the reason why they actually invest so much money and do whatever they have to do and even become violent at some point is because they are going into an office where they are going to reap big. So the electorate in that case, they are like, okay, we are taking you there to earn. Give us ours now.
Our share is here.
Our share now. Because after all, you don't even come back. You only come back when you're looking for votes,
yes.
again. So let's transact now. You go eat your money and give me my part now. So there's a big chunk of that, and that's because of the trust, the mistrust the electorate have towards the leaders. And it's the nature of our politics now. That is one. Two, without discounting the issue of poverty, it's true, because how do you explain someone who is given a bar of soap, a kilo of sugar, and even when it's money, you are given 50,000 and you are about 100 people to your share, and is getting about 500 shillings. I think it's poverty that also gets to the mind for you to not to be able to relate how that eventually long-term affects you. So yes, poverty is in part playing into why we are having this so much transactional and commercialized politics. But also, lastly, I think the bigger point here we must observe is that when you look at the nature of our politics, people do not necessarily because it's so commercialized.
Yes.
It has created a certain group of people who automatically qualify to be part of it. So people like
as long as you're rich.
Yes, people like you who can rationalize, who can reason, who can actually offer something. You are like, I cannot be part of that.
Yes.
I cannot contest. First of all, it's very expensive.
It's messy.
It is messy. Some go to the extent of saying, I think my reputation cannot be soiled in that arena. So you leave it to people who have made money in all forms that are questionable, some, and then they join politics to protect their wealth, to access
more bids and deals.
And because of that, you find yourself that it locks out a certain category of people who are able, people with ethics and integrity, and it leaves it to.
That brings me to my next question, Felix. Given that we are voting people who are rich, people who have a cloud of money going into the parliament, does this explain why some policies are failing to work? Because people who are there, they are business oriented than policy oriented to change the lives they want to see on the ground.
Yes, there is a direct relationship between the process of electing a leader politically and policy making. First of all, the people who bankroll politicians have vested interests.
True.
And it's there, and this is world over. Even in
the US,
in the US, the countries where we esteem their democracy,
it has been challenged this time.
Yes, yes. So that is one. But also, when people join parliament for very many reasons, but primarily, if they were honest, they will tell you it's business. But they will hide behind "I'm going to serve." It's the card they play. Because it is business, even legislation or policy making becomes a business.
They're following the tunes of the piper who paid them to get in.
Yes, and also they organize themselves around interests. Because policy making, usually their interests around that are
the
involved.
Lobbyists
The lobbyists, yes, yes. There are very many legislations that have been in parliament that when you dig.
They are bogus policies.
Yes, and you see vested interest. You see some people financing a certain policy to take a certain direction. And the behavior of MPs in parliament to especially, I'm sorry, I'm going to say about the NRM MPs, where they first hold a trance from the president, and they do it. It's a tactic. And then he first calls them to
Changkwanzi, to review.
Yes.
And then they come back.
And then they first put up some kind of a resistance.
There is something that went around the line, and I'm sure Julius Mukunda, you heard about this, where there was it was a contentious issue in the floor of parliament, which had to be passed, but they said we can respond to that next week, and that very weekend, all NRM MPs were called for literate, and it is said, rumors have it, that in that literate, people were given 5 to 20 million Ugandan shillings, depending on your clout and influence you have. And when they got back the following week, those in support say I, and you know, and it all went through safe and sound. Do you feel, as someone who looks at things with different lenses, that the leadership we're having in one way or the other has fueled commercialization of politics?
Yes, like I said, you see, you can't run away from the process. If I came through a process that was commercialized, I invested my money. You know, these people,
you need a return to investment.
These people invest. These people liquidate their assets, liquidate their marital homes. They borrow heavily from money lenders, from banks. So when they eventually swear, they must reap. They must make a return on that investment. It's an investment. It's a do or die. And that partly explains why we have violence. You see, you cannot eliminate electoral violence from too much money in an electoral process. Because if I've invested everything I've got, the issue is I can't lose. So I'll have plan A and plan B.
Yes.
Plan A, use money. If it's not working, plan B,
influencing.
I'll orchestrate some bit of violence.
Can you wait?
Yes, yes, yes. So to answer your question is that the process that gets us leaders already points us to a situation whereby, first of all, it gives us leaders that are questionable integrity. When you are using money as your best weapon to convince me, have you listened to most politicians campaigning?
They're not selling ideas.
They're not necessarily giving us alternatives. For me to say, okay, I think your alternative to primary health care is better than the other candidate. It's making a lot of sense.
It's a blame game going on.
It speaks to me. Yeah, it's a blame game. You didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you did that kind of politics, which I call amateur politics.
It is pedestrian.
It's really pedestrian. So when you are in that kind of situation, it means that your best weapon is the money. And the voters love the money, and they respond to whoever gives them the money. Yeah, so they will vote you, you'll get in there, you will not necessarily have ideas. If you've been observing our parliament, the quality every after election year
drops. Thank you. Mr. Julius Mukunda, I'm sure you're following this conversation. It's very interesting, looking at the policies and the quality of the leaders we have in the parliament or in the different leadership positions, depending on the process that brought them to the table, plus what they're doing. What do you make of it?
Yes, I think it's quite right. The process determines the outcome. But here is, I mean, it's like the end justifies the means, but the process determines the outcome. The political situation right now is so competitive that people can even commit suicide to ensure that they get into parliament. But I think there is another fundamental area that we need also to look at. How did we get here? We got here because of two major reasons. One is that corruption has really get into the core of our work. And corruption, of course, is because services have not equitably been distributed to the people. That because of that, now we have poverty. So it is just survival politics. So when we have corruption and then you have poverty, then it means that people look at you as their savior. And because the last elections, what you promised you did not deliver, then the deal must be done now. And as such, relationships are built on money. So please, I'll pay you, I'll give you a goat, I'll give you soap so that you can vote me in power. But because I know I don't trust you a lot, I might have to increase on my bargaining power and say, look, last time you did not deliver where they were you promised me, so please, this time you must deliver more. That's why you see we had a huge issue with MPs fight on the allowances, on taxing the allowances. And the point they had was, we are a small government in our constituencies. We are a hospital, we are a school, we are roads, we are an ambulance, and in most cases they could be right. But why? Simply because they left their core mandate of ensuring that services reach the people, and they have decided to be the services themselves. So that definitely stops them from looking at the big picture of ensuring that we need to put an oversight on the executive to deliver. That's why when it came to the COVID funds again, they said, oh, executive has taken more money, so we even as MPs, we should take our own money and go and serve our constituencies. An indication that they no longer care about what the executive is doing. Now they are saying, I think it's time also to get our own money and go and finance our own work. So when you see this, when I was telling you that for me, the financial year where there are elections, I count it as a loss. You can see the practices that MPs, everybody is fighting to return at whatever cost. And I think that's very, 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 very dangerous on our part. So let us build back the spirit of voting for ideas.
Mr.
Let
Mukunda,
us bring back the spirit of ensuring that we have the right and the quality people in our parliament. Thank you.
then from the current mode that is financially, motivated, to ideas, where did we go wrong as a nation? You have hinted on corruption, yes, but we are a new generation. We are a younger generation. How best can we sanitize the politics of our country and we say, look, we're going to take the ideas direction. We're not going to go, the current mode.
I think what needs to be done right now is that it must be reflected again in the leadership. If I'm going to be appointed on that commission, if I'm going to be appointed as a judge, if I'm going to be appointed as a head of a government institution, how am I being appointed? Is it because of whom I know, or is it because of what I plan to deliver on the table? And if we don't bring that from the topmost leadership, from the president, from parliament, then it means that downwards things are just going to be wrong. So we must fight corruption of any form at all. We must fight corruption of any form at all. And not only corruption of just stealing money, but also corrupting, being discriminatory, for example. Because I find that if you treat me differently, already for me, I feel that is corruption. Yet we are supposed to be treated equally. If I go to a court and my colleague gets a bail, and for me, I can't get bail, then what does that mean? So I think we need to anchor it to that particular level where communities can have trust in the systems, that these systems can deliver for them justice that they are seeking for, that the system can deliver service equally. Why should a sub-county get a borehole and this one does not get a borehole, yet they all have the same needs and they submitted their needs at once and all their needs were approved? Why should you want this sub-county to get money first and the other one does not get money first? And even the right reason. So for me, really, is those are the basic things that we need to start with. And I think the incoming government could start on that and say, let us get back to building our country. Let us get back to build humanity. And I think for me, that's the key and the most important part we should look at. Lastly, is reprimand people who are not doing the right things. It is very embarrassing that when somebody has stolen billions of money, the next day you meet them on the street. They are walking, they are fine, and the case almost died. So those also examples show that actually you can steal money and you go away with it, or you can make a wrong and then you go away with it. We need to have a system of reprimanding seriously people who have wronged us. Thank you.
Kamukonde, what he has alluded to makes a lot more sense. I want to start with his last statement of reprimanding those who have been implicated in dubious deals and scandals that are corrupt related. Do you believe to that approach?
Yes. If you are to fight a vice, let me put it that way, is that one, you must have corrective measures and also preventive measures. Preventive measures are those things we put in place that people do not necessarily take that path. And one would be, ideally, is the state must be present in offering services. Because when you don't have, when the state is absent in offering basic services, you create room for corruption. Because someone must access a service, either way. The corrective measures are those things that are embedded in the law and are enforced. Yeah.
Keyword is enforced.
Yeah, the keyword is enforced, and I think we have fallen short when it comes to enforcement. Now, whether this current regime, I'm sorry to say so, and when I say regime, I'm not necessarily referring just to NRM, but even the current crop of Ugandans, because it's been a culture about 30 years. There are small things people do, and you don't necessarily have to blame the government. Like,
it's a system they've grown up with.
It's a system, they have a broken system, where certain things, the wrongs appear right, the abnormal appear normal. You throw garbage everywhere, you don't respect elders. Those things are starting.
Thieves are praised and given grand entrance.
Yeah, those are abnormalities that are normal now. Today. But for me, a point I don't want to lose. You see, you asked the question, what can we do?
Yes. As a nation, to move away from this.
To move away from this. First of all, for me, I think we need to make politics less lucrative.
How?
Why would I be paying an MP that amount of money?
So we go the Swedish way, that an MP is paid less money in the UK. An MP is paid less money than a doctor, than a nurse.
Exactly. Exactly. So that you now attract. You don't attract businessmen. You attract
brilliance and ideas.
And leaders. That can solve the problem. We've also for a long time been pushing for an independent law on campaign financing. Where it has been applied, it has managed to kind of like create some bit of sanity on putting caps on how much should be spent, but also declaring the source of money. Because right now there's a problem of the source of money. Some of that money is coming from sources that have vested interests
in the candidate.
Some of them even is coming from foreign sources, probably.
Oh yes. The president has already talked about
yes, so that also puts into, it compromises our security, our sovereignty as a nation. So that law is important. This is not a law that is about to victimize anybody. It's an important law to put sanity in how we finance campaigns.
The campaigns and the election season.
Yes. But also, lastly, I think it's high time. And I think at some point we shall get there, because I've seen pockets of this, where the electorate start to reward performing
MPs.
or leaders. So that is, you can't spend on me true, but either way, I'll use my head.
I'll score.
Who has actually performed,
And
all who has a better, elaborate manifesto that speaks to my needs. When we get there, they will realize that, okay, that avenue no longer works, and they will quit.
We need to change.
Yeah.
When you look at institutions like the Financial Intelligence Authority, do you think they're really working with all this money that is being spent left, right, and center?
In a cash economy, you know, you see, it is easy. I think they are trying, but they have challenges. First of all, Uganda is largely a cash economy.
Indeed.
People have sacks of money
In their homes.
in their bedrooms. How are you tracking that money? It's not going through the system. So I think the nature of our economy also kind of like affects how the Financial Intelligence Authority can, because it can only track money that goes through a system and be able to crack the whip. And most money used in politics, in campaigns, it doesn't go through that system.
That's the thing.
First of all, a good number of people, that money is ill-gotten wealth. So it cannot go through the system. So FIA will not track that money. So that's why the challenge is. So it's a good initiative, but given the context, it cannot entirely, it can't entirely score on its mandate.
Wow.
And that's the challenge.
Well, there you have it. It's a conversation. Those online who were part of this, thank you so much. Your tweets are coming through. Let's keep them coming. Someone is on Twitter, and someone just sent a message and said, with this, we cannot actually make sure that things happen as and when they should. When you see the money, you know who you're going to talk to. Thank you so much, Judy Banks. As we're winding up this conversation, Mr. Mukunda, what could be your last word to the voters as someone who is at the forefront of looking at fairness operational in the biggest scale?
Thanks. The conversation is really very good, and I think for me is from the economics perspective is where like the question asked, where is this taking us? For the voters, I think it's very important that you ask people, those who are coming, what they intended to do one thing for you. I think let us even forget there are so many problems. One thing for you. How are you going to increase your income? That's very important, whether it is through jobs, whether it is through a small enterprise that you are starting, whether it is through a skill you are going to acquire and sell. How are you going to increase your income? So these people must come up with ideas on how government is going to improve the incomes of the population. That's number one. My colleague there mentioned something about reducing the expenses on parliament, and I think that's very, very important. The next government in power must rationalize government expense agencies and put a salary commission. If we could put a salary commission, I'm telling you, half of our problems will be solved. Because that means that it's only people who have already made their money, they are very rich, they just want to contribute to the country, that they will be running for these slots. From LC the presidents, because that means that people, only those with ideas and want to contribute in their later retirement life will be part of this politics. But now, everybody wants to survive, and they are really spoiled the politics in this country. Thanks so much, and it was a pleasure enjoying the debate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mukunda. Felix, what could be your last words to Ugandans watching this early morning?
I think my parting shots are that let's treat elections with the decency it deserves. I think it's the only opportunity you have to elect a leader who is going to address your needs. So the electorate out there, this is the only chance they can hold the leader accountable. They can set the agenda, and they can be assured that the next 5 years, my needs will be addressed.
They are in charge.
They are in charge. And they should treat this process with the respect it deserves. Yes.
Well, there you have it. That is a conversation we've had. Thank you so much, those who have been a part of this conversation. I'll take a break for now. It's still morning at NTV. Keep it here, and we're